Hello, internet friends. My name is Catherine, and I'm the human behind Christian Miss Couture. And today it's another Color Wheel Monday, the series in which I do make my way through the color wheel and color theory, one color at a time. So, what we're going to be adding to our fire engine red today, we're going to be adding ultraviolet, and we're also going to be comparing the um, ultraviolet with when we added carabin blue to see how the color will be impacting our final result. And also, same reason as for other things, I want to be able to compare it for when we're going to be using the ultraviolet as our primary colors, and how adding those colors in different proportions will affect the final hue and colors and all that. So let's get into this. Okay, welcome back. And for the last time, we'll be using the red for Color Wheel Monday. Yep, we will have completed my mission to test out all the colors with the red, so that way we have a point of comparison to when we're going to be dyeing those colors. So today we're going to be dyeing with adding the violet to our 1% depth of shade of red, fire engine red, so that way when we are ready to add red to our violet, we'll have a point of comparison for this section. So I'm very excited because I was starting to get sick of the red and looking like I've murdered someone every time I dye this. So we're going to be adding in the jar a 1% stock solution to create a 1% depth of shade for our 10-gram mini skeins, which means that we're adding 10 milliliters of this 1% stock solution in each of the jars. And after that, we'll be adding the violet in increment up to a 1% depth of shade as well. So that way we can see how potent the ultraviolet is, and also how it affects the final color. And if adding a tiny bit will create a colder color, or if it's going to be creating, like, well, most likely a different shade of purple, but you know, we're here for the science and experimentation. So here we're adding 0.05, 1. Here we're going to be adding our 2.5 for the 0.25 depth of shade for the ultraviolet. We were missing a tiny bit. What are your expectations for this one? Do you think it's going to be more on the cool tone side? Okay, so I need 5. 7.5. I'm just very curious to see what it's going to look like, and I took this opportunity to share with all of you, my internet friends. And 10 milliliters, or 10% depth of shade. Okay, okay. And I've made a mess as usual. Who's surprised by this? Not me. Okay, so let's stir a little bit. So I do believe that the red will most likely be, like, not the winner, but will still feel slightly red, more on the red side of the things, because violet is usually a mix of red and blue. We know that blue is more potent and it has a tendency to just overpower everything. So we can still see a hint of red in this, but I'm just wondering how long in. And I don't usually do tissue tests, but it's just pure curiosity at this point. Because we know that it's not 100% reliable, simply due to the fact that there's no heat, no acid, no nothing in there besides water and the dye. So we need to take the results with a grain of salt. And some blues will not bind, or like the color will not bloom until you have acid or heat. So it kind of gives a raspberry color. Interesting. Okay. So we're going to be adding the yarn. There we go. And we'll also try to compare it with when we've added the the Caribbean blue, because we might have similar results for some colors. And we might not too. Because, it's not technically the same color, because it is not. Okay, so we're going to be adding this into the pan so we can do the double boiler. Let's add the water. Okay, let's turn on the heat. Okay, here I can see that this tie is a little tight, so it's going to create resistance. So I'm just going to poke it out so we try to have as much as possible an even coverage for the colors. So we're going to be adding the acid now. And like I've mentioned in previous video, we don't need a whole lot of acid since we only have 10 grams mini skeins in those jars. So we are using half a teaspoon, and even half a teaspoon is a little much. So, but it's okay. That's fine. The worst that could happen if you're adding too much acid is that you would not have an even coverage of the color, because the dye would strike quicker on some strands versus others. So this is something that you need to keep in mind. If you're just like, oh, too much acid, isn't there's no such thing. There is such thing, and in some cases, it would create the oh man, I can't remember the name of this specific technique. Oh boy, I have a brain that is not functioning right now. Oh, I did a video about it. It creates a porous visual to your color. Okay, so we added the citric acid. We added the heat. So now we're going to let this cook for a while, wash it, and let it dry overnight, and we'll see the result tomorrow. See you in a bit. Okay, so now we've got everything all dyed up, and I noticed in some of the jars there was a little tint, and I'm fairly certain it's the ultraviolet that left that tint. So this is why what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to let it soak for a little longer. So this is something that you're more than welcome to do. It's like when you're doing blocking for your finished object. You can let it soak for about half an hour if you want, and then after that you rinse off and you make sure that you don't have any excess dye left over. Once again, I should have separate the ones with the lower depth of shades of the ultraviolet versus when we have our 0.5%, 0.75%, and 1% depth of shade of ultraviolet, because the culprit were those three colors. So that's why we had a little bit more of a harder time to wash off the excess dyes. And I'm not very surprised because, purple, there is blue in there. So usually as soon as you have a hint of blue somewhere, you will have a little bit more bleeding. However, I'm not exactly certain why blues have a tendency to bleed a little bit more. I should do I should try to do some more research on that because I am very curious to see why we have that situation happening. So this is something that I'm very curious to see. And we're going to be washing this. And after we finish washing the skeins, I'm going to show you my mason jars so you'll be able to see that it's a very faint hint of the ultraviolet in the mason jars. So I wasn't super concerned that it would be like a completely bleed out and it would look like a murder scene or anything. I was just concerned that we would have a little bit of an excess color in the bath after. So it's just a quick rinse after that. And I don't think you can see properly, but there was a faint hint, but really nothing concerning to me. So we're going to watch the mason jar, let it dry overnight, and after that we'll see it. So you can see it's a very faint hint. And here's the final result of adding the ultraviolet to our fire engine red. And you can see that we actually do have a difference in shades and colors. Some of them are similar, but not exactly the same shade or hue, which is very fun and interesting to see. So we could probably try to find those recipes by ourselves with our primary colors, since in ultraviolet you would need like either red or pink with a blue to create it, and then you would be adding your red in the different quantities. So this is an excellent exercise to do. So to compare both of them, because that way you can see how like adding a certain amount of one dye will tweak your recipe. So if you're someone who likes to experiment with tonals and stuff like that, you can tweak recipes that you have at home, by adding some colors in a very small amount to create a different shades. And once we're done with the color wheel and primary colors and all that, what we're going to do is experiment more with tweaking recipes and creating pyramids of colors that we can work from to see how colors interact with each other. And this was mainly the reason I did it, so we could compare both of this, but also be able to compare once we reach the ultraviolet color in our color wheel to this and that, to see how similar they are, first of all, but also how different the shade will have affected the final result, because we all know that in the ultraviolet the blue might be different than the carabine blue that we used for this. I have carabine blue here, so you can see how vibrant this is, and we've created those darker colors here. So it's the same thing with the ultraviolet. We will be creating, oh, I think I swapped those, whoops, my bad, I'm sorry. So yeah, uh, the shade will impact the final result of the color, and that's something that we know. So it's very interesting to see how it does affect the final color and how different both colors turns out to be, because I'm not sure which shades they use in the ultraviolet premix powders, and it's good to be able to try to recreate colors without the secondary colors and try to do it with your primary colors, because you never know, sometimes they reformulate your your secondary colors and you don't have the same shade exactly. So it's always interesting to try to see what you can do with your primary colors. So if you like the video, please consider sharing, liking, and subscribing, and I will see you in the next one very soon. Bye!